Our devotion today comes from 1 John chapter 2, beginning in verse 18 and working through the rest of that chapter. And today, John is giving us a warning about the Antichrist. Before we look at that, though, remember today to be praying for Stella Clark. So I would imagine that many of us are familiar, or we've at least heard of this term, the Antichrist. And it refers to the book of Revelation, to that prophecy about the end times, about the end times. I mean, we're talking about the Great Tribulation, and we have this person who shows up on the scene, basically setting himself up as God to be worshipped, to be the ruler over the earth, and you have the beast there, and they support one another. But that's what we think about when we think about the Antichrist. And we know that the people that John was writing to knew about this prophecy. They knew about the Antichrist. Interestingly enough, John was the one who received the vision of Revelation. And he says, you've heard that the Antichrist is coming. And he says, and yeah, that absolutely is true, but he says this interesting thing that I'm going to tell you that even now, many Antichrists have already come. And he's referring, it seems, to people that they may have experienced, that they knew, people who had rejected Christ. And when you get down to it, and even here, that's how it describes what it means. It's like the spirit of the Antichrist. Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father either. He who acknowledges the Son has the Father also. And so the Antichrist, in the end, the one that's going to come, will be the one who ultimately rejects Christ, denies Christ, and wants himself to be set up as Christ. But even now, that spirit, the spirit of the Antichrist, is in the world today, in those who deny Christ. And I think just like that time, that end time, is going to be a time of great deception where people are going to be fooled into worshiping the false god. I think that deception is very great throughout the world today, and that's part of why John is warning them. Be on guard, because these people, they were infiltrating the church, spreading lies, drawing people away from Christ to worship whatever, with that spirit of the Antichrist. And so what is John's instructions to them on how they can protect themselves from the Antichrists? And it begins, let me see here. Begins in verse 24. His response to what he's just told them about these Antichrists is, he says, therefore, let that abide in you, which you heard from the beginning. And he's talking about the beginning of their salvation. When they came to know Christ, meditate on that. I think that's pretty incredible. We know that we always continue to grow in Christ, to learn more about who God is. He continually reveals himself to us. And yet when we received Christ, when we first came to know the truth of the gospel, we received everything that we need. We received Christ himself, and all we have to do is continue to abide in that. We can meditate on who Christ is for all of eternity and continue to grow closer to him. And it's a safeguard for us to remind ourselves of the basics, of the foundation of our salvation, of the truth that we know to be true, to protect ourselves from the lies. If we grow slack in that, if we don't meditate on the truth that we know, we're leaving ourselves open, vulnerable to be lied to and to be drawn away from Christ. And I don't believe that we can lose our salvation, but I believe that the enemy wants to deceive us, and we need to be aware of that, to protect ourselves and continually meditate on the truth that we've known from the very beginning on who Christ is and what salvation is, to remind ourselves of those things, to abide in that, abide in him. If the Lord spoke something to you today out of this passage, I would ask, leave us a message on Facebook and YouTube. Let's remember to minister to one another